Welcome back to Up in the Blue Seats, a podcast from the New York Post. As always, I'm your host, Mollie Walker, and I'm joined by Hall of Famer Larry Brooks and former New York Ranger Brian Boyle. Rangers are 2-2, I think, since we last convened, I believe. A pretty brutal 6-1 loss to the Sabres, a weird 4-0 win over Detroit, a 6-3 loss to the NHL leading Jets, and a 3-2 win over the Sharks Thursday night. But I think that we have to start there for obvious reasons, because that win definitely was secondary to what actually happened in the game. Filip Chytil exited briefly in the second period after a collision with K'Andre Miller along the half wall, and he was pretty shaken up. Looked like he was told to leave, and he did, but came back pretty quickly. Then he took a 61-second shift and was then ruled out for the remainder of the game. As usual, there was no update from Peter Laviolette after the game, just day to day, and that he was getting evaluated still. We probably won't know much more until practice on Saturday. But Larry, what was your initial reaction and thoughts to seeing that?
Flashbacks to watching Eric Lindros go down, flashbacks to watching Pat LaFontaine go down, flashback just over a year to watching Filip Chytil go down. And listen, the priority is Filip Chytil's health, his well-being. But if Filip Chytil is down for a substantial amount of time, which he certainly could be, this is devastating for the Rangers. He's been their best player. He's centered their best line. They are constructed as a 3-scoring line team, and that only works if you have 3-scoring line centers. And if Filip Chytil is out, then we're back to the Rangers are back to where they were a year ago in this situation, where they will probably fill in with Johnny Brodzinski. Sam Carrick, rather than Barclay Goodrow, becomes a little more important. I would imagine the fourth line would get a little more ice time, but it totally changes the dynamic of their team completely, and it takes away the player who had been playing with urgency on every shift, which is something the Rangers don't do. Mm-hmm. Not very many of them do that. But he was playing at a different tempo. We talked about this, the first month. What a pleasure it's been to watch him play. But there was always, there was always a sense of foreboding. He carried the puck with his head down. He was racing recklessly and without abandon. I mean, he was going to get the most out of this that he could, and he did. Whether this has come to an end or not, I certainly can't say. But if this is a significant injury, this is a major obstacle for the Rangers.
Yeah, it's hard to say. It's hard to say what it's going to be. Maybe they're precautionary with it, just really, really being careful because it's early in the season. But I mean, I don't know what was going on in the play. What you had support coming down towards the net. I didn't even, if he got that puck, what was he going to do with it? And then, so I mean, there's K'Andre Miller's definitely not to blame. I think he was going where he should have gone. That's not an issue at all. Yeah, it's right back to hopefully it's an abundance of caution.
You would want to think that Rangers fans and anybody who's been watching this team can take some solace in the fact that the Rangers won the President's Trophy last season, despite only having Chytil for 10 games of the regular season. But for some reason, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, it just doesn't feel that way, especially because of how important he's been to the Rangers this season. And like you said, Larry, playing at a different level and pace than everybody else.
Yeah. And, I have to remind myself almost on a daily basis that the Rangers record is what it is. I honestly, yesterday I remember writing my early yesterday, and I think, well, what are they, like 4-9? And no, they're 9-4-1, and they're 10-4-1. But it doesn't feel that way. a year ago, you felt, I'm not sure what their record was after 15. It was very good because they got off to a very good
Yeah.
start. But you appreciated their structure last year. You appreciated their discipline last year. And structure and systems are supposed to protect players, are supposed to patch up weaknesses. This year, the structure has been as much of an issue as every player's individual performances. I don't feel particularly good about the Rangers without Filip Chytil at this point. And you're taking away their best player at this point. You're taking away their best line at this point. And maybe again, maybe this is an abundance of caution. But if it was an abundance of caution, why did he go out? Why did he go out for another shift? So I'm not sure. Honestly, I don't know. But it didn't look good. It didn't feel good.
Yeah, maybe he wanted to. Maybe he's like, I'm
no, that's the thing.
That's for sure.
If sure. I mean, that's what we were saying in the press box. I mean, because I was thinking about it, and again, this is all speculation, but knowing Chytil, of course he was like, I can go back out there. I'm fine. And then clearly there was a moment, whether it was between the second and third, or at the end of the second, where it was very clear to him that he couldn't anymore. So I think that's also pretty concerning. And if you just reflect on what his recovery journey was like last season, I mean, it was grueling. It was a setback in January, a reset trip to his native country, and then bouncing in and out of the lineup in the playoffs because, he had been away for so long. Obviously, we don't know the details, but he had been away from the ice for so long, not playing in game action for so long, and probably still dealing with the remnants of this, suspected concussion that he had last season. But Brian, you could speak to this more, but I'm just wondering how deflating it could be for the Rangers locker room when you do lose a player who has been playing the way that Filip Chytil has, especially given how the team has been playing lately as well.
Well, I could go a number of ways, but probably one of two ways, really. You have an opportunity now, and I know we'll get to this a little bit later, but you can go back to some lines that really worked last year for the most part. And if you can get Zibanejad's line sort of where they were even last year when we still wanted a little more out of Mika at times, I think you'll be okay. But you feel for your teammate. That happens, but they've done that before. They feel for the teammate, and it always sucks. I mean, it's not, but what are you going to do? You can't just go to practice and be sad that your teammate's not there and then not practice hard or be distracted. Like, you're a professional. You got to go to work and be better. Like, let's get better. We won 3-2. A couple weird bounces for both San Jose's goals, but they're San Jose. Like, we got scored on in the first minute again against Winnipeg with all that talk with Winnipeg coming in. Like, we got scored on in the first minute against Buffalo, albeit not a great goal, but a breakdown nonetheless. Florida comes in. We get scored on in the first shift again. These are all at home. So these are all like I'd like to talk about that. What are we – the reason
what
Larry –
are we doing?
Yeah, what are we doing? Larry,
finish the sentence.
I just think the reason Larry thinks it's like I have to remind myself their record is because of, they won the President's Trophy, but that's not what this is about. Like, you can lose to Florida, you can lose to Winnipeg. I just don't like parts of it that you think this is a mature team, that if they fall short here or there, or it's a special teams battle and they might lose that's one thing. But like, puck drop. Start on time. That was what I took from that. And it's not like, I know they're all trying. I know they all care. I know some of them pretty well. It's difficult. It's a hard league. And when you come into MSP,
they haven't, honestly, they haven't been impressive for weeks. And they started, they had a very soft schedule at the start, and they beat up on the soft teams, which is what top tier teams are supposed to do. But they lost something along the way very quickly, and they haven't been able to get it back. I don't know. There's been there was so much talk about Shesterkin's contract, and there's just been a lot hovering around this team. It seems to me, they're running it back. They didn't really want to. It's the same, essentially the same group trying to do this again, and I think it's very difficult. I think to me it looks stale. It just does. It looks stale.
Well, I think that's why they made the mix up. And they switched up the pairings. They switched up the forward lines. This is, I guess I should say this first. This is okay because if you come out of this, the level of confidence the next time things get tough, it helps you. You can look back. Remember November. Remember, we won games and then whatever. We didn't play well against this team or that team. Like, that's not going to happen again because of these things. We're going to do this better. We're going to do that better. And that's a silver lining. And they are good enough to not play their best and win. That's another silver lining. So I think they demand more. So the fact that they're probably not satisfied individually or collectively, that's a great sign if you're a Rangers fan as well.
Before we get into the line changes that we saw, one thing that kind of sounded alarm bells off in my mind was the Detroit game in particular, just because they have played that team twice already earlier in the season in the span of 4 days. I believe they outscored them 9-3 in those two games. And then the third game, it looked like a completely different matchup. I just wonder how, like to Larry's point, how the team could lose that in such a short amount of time to completely change the complexion of a matchup that we've seen them dominate already earlier this season. That, I think, is the most concerning. Alarm bells are kind of going off a little bit for me after that game in particular. I don't know if you guys felt the same or not.
Well, I mean,
the score could have been inverted. I mean, the fact that they won 4-0 was just insane to me. Yes, Johnny Quick had a great
They've had trouble for years with quick teams who turn it around quickly on them. They're not a fast team.
Is Detroit a really fast team?
Detroit has some
they look faster.
Yeah. Well, Buffalo looked like they were giants flying around the ice.
Right. And the Rangers have always had trouble with fast, quick teams. They like to think they are fast. They're not. They're not. I think there are situations, certainly in the defensive zone, where lack of speed hurts them in their coverage when someone's out of position they can't get back. They talked so much and they were so proud about their structure last year. This was the difference between Gerard Gallant's team and Peter Laviolette's team. And let's not forget the Rangers had success under Gallant. They went to the conference final, and then the next year they finished with more than 100 points. But there was no structure, and that's what the players wanted. They demanded, we want structure, we want structure, we want structure. Where is the structure? I don't know.
I think once you can harness that and really make it, I guess I'll go back to Buffalo. Like, they played a really structured, simple game to start in the Garden last week, and when you're structured, you're disciplined that way, you can be more predictable to each other and play a faster game. And they collapsed in their own zone. Rangers couldn't really get inside. It's a big team. Buffalo is. That's what's been lacking with Buffalo, with Ottawa, with Detroit, those teams that everyone's, when are they going to take the step? You've got to fall on your structure. You can play poorly sometimes, and you're not going to give much up, and you'll get a chance if you're patient enough. So with the Rangers, when they get back to that, when they get the puck back, they play faster because everybody's in the right spots. You don't need that much time to react. You can close quicker in your own end. Maybe it's because they fiddled with the lines and the deep pairings, and then it doesn't necessarily, you put them back, it doesn't go right back because the other stuff's in your head now. Wait, the things you do without having to overly think about it, they become sort of a natural movement. They go away because you're trying to adjust playing with a new player. These things happen. I'm just speaking on behalf of the players here. When something's off, your team definitely always plays slower because there's a little hesitation. You have to think more. You're looking around more instead of teams that can adjust quickly when you move things around. I remember Torts used to change this around all the time, but everybody finished checks. Like you couldn't not finish a check. You wouldn't play. So that kind of gives you structure again. That kind of helps you eliminate plays. There's less confusion that way. So those are just a couple things I can think of as to why it sort of might look this way.
Yeah, and I agree with everything that you're seeing. I'm seeing the exact same thing. And I just feel like the Rangers have lost so much of their cohesiveness that they were playing with in the beginning of the season. It just doesn't look cohesive anymore. The breakouts are still just killing them. I mean, it's just nothing is clean. Nothing is clean leaving their zone. Nothing is clean entering the offensive zone. And this is a team that when they are clicking on all cylinders, they are entering the zone easily. They are making passes and seeing that their teammates on the ice in ways that the other team can't see it before they do. It's been a pretty tough watch lately. It has.
It's funny. Last week, there was a survey by a publication, and the Rangers are actually picked to come out of the East. And it's like people who don't watch the Rangers are impressed by them, but no one who's watching them every game is impressed. No one. And it's funny too. You know, Brian, you alluded to this, but I was talking to Trocheck after one of the games last week. I think maybe after they lost to Buffalo, and I was saying, you know, I was referencing the record, and he said, yeah, he said that is the silver lining in all this, that we're not playing well, but then we look at where we are, and if we start to play well, then we'll be in a different level. And so this has given them a cushion. There's no question about it, but it's not going to last forever. It isn't, because it's going to be a tough road trip. That, you know, they've had an easy schedule. You can only play the schedule you're assigned, and that's great. But all of their wins, except for the one against Toronto, has come against bottom 7 or 8 teams in the league, bottom 10 teams in the league. You're not going to play bottom 10 teams in the league forever. You have to play the top 10 teams sometimes, and the middle 10 teams sometimes. So you look at their record, and it's a funhouse mirror, though. If they really think they're 10-4, if they really think they are representative at 10-4-1, they're kidding themselves. And I don't think that's what I do not think any of them are kidding themselves. I think they all understand that their play has not been up to their standard. They
probably get it that Carolina and Jersey are what they are as well.
Yeah.
They want to elevate to get up to there. So, I mean, that could be a good carrot. Get better, and if you win that division with those two teams, that's impressive. I don't care, how you do it. So you got to play them. But those are two really good teams in your own division.
Yeah, I think it was pretty apparent after the Jets loss that the Rangers needed to go back specifically to the Panarin, Trocheck, Lafreniere line. I think that putting that line back together was just so necessary, and I think that they were pretty good last night. And then, of course, putting Cooley, Chytil, and Kakko back together as well. But, I mean, that's obviously up in the air now amid Chytil's injury, but that had been one of their best lines, like we said. So fun to watch, and just a consistently effective group, no matter who they were playing. And then Laviolette also went back to Miller, Fox, Lindgren, Trouba as their top 4. They sent Victor Mancini down to Hartford. I mean, Larry, you had written extensively about how the proof was in the pudding for the defensive pairs and their numbers. And it was the right decision to go back to Miller, Fox in particular.
Well, I think you go to Miller, Fox, but I would like to see Braden Schneider playing in the top 4. We've talked about this, a number of times. So that's really, I would like to see Braden Schneider get more ice time. I think the Trouba-Lindgren pair is slow. They are very slow. They need to be protected by structure. And if the Rangers are undisciplined with that pair on the ice, Ryan Lindgren tries, but they're in trouble. So I don't love their pairings at this point, unless they're going to give the Jones-Schneider pair a lot more responsibility and see how that goes. I'm not sure how that would work, but I don't. I would like, I think Victor Mancini earned a spot on the team. He had a couple of tough games, and I know you don't have to rush young players. You certainly don't have to rush young defensemen. It's the middle of November. I've talked about this before. Ryan McDonough's first year, he was played in the American League for half the season before he came up in January, and that was Ryan McDonough. So it's always constructive for a young defenseman to play in the American League. I think Brian Boyle, an example. But honestly, I would like to see Mancini on the team. I think they're going to need to turn this over a little bit. I do. Like I've this could be just me, but I've talked so much about how it's stale. It's probably getting stale how much I talk about it. So I think they need to inject new personalities, younger players into the room and give them more responsibility. That's what I think they're going to have to do as the season evolves.
I just think there's a number of players, if it doesn't go right, it's too long of a hole that they dig themselves in. Like they can't bounce back and have the confidence or the attitude to just say, that's not me. I'm gonna play. So, and I saw it. Schneider's a good example. You see it sometimes with Miller. You certainly see it with Zibanejad. But just talking defense, like Braden Schneider goes back to the third pair, and he's backing up too much. He's backing off. He's not playing an in-your-face game where he's physical and he's got the attitude that when he has it, he's playing his best. Like, understand how good of a player you are. There's the people I talk to that don't watch a ton of Rangers. They love this kid. I watch him a lot. I love the kid. I think he should be. He's definitely top 4 talent, but they need him to be that guy. And he just, when he's back on maybe getting a few less shifts per period, doesn't want to make a mistake. He plays like it. You can see he's playing like he doesn't want to make a mistake. You're going to make a mistake. Everybody does. It's a good league. Go out with an attitude like, I'm better than you. I think there's a number of guys up and down the lineup that could do that, and they would, because look at what they've done. Look at their careers individually, and look at your ability as a team when you're playing your best. Remind yourself of that. That's what the young players, it's a hard thing for a young player to figure out, but once you do, I mean, that's what makes good players great.
I'm wondering what names you guys are thinking of, especially in Hartford. And I reported Thursday night that Brennan Othman is going to be out at least through Christmas now, is what it's looking like. So he is not an option.
I don't see many centers.
Yeah, I know. That's the thing. They're so thin organizationally down the middle.
I don't think they'll be promoting Matt Rempe to play in the middle.
No. Well, I mean, he hasn't.
We're using him down there, right?
Yeah, he hasn't been playing well.
No,
in Hartford either. He has been playing in the middle. He's been centering the second line every night, so it seems. But the
numbers are bad. I haven't seen.
Yeah,
the numbers.
It doesn't look great. It doesn't look great. I don't think he's an option.
No.
But I would
just throw him in the middle. Like center's easy. It's the hardest position. And don't get me started on D. I played them all. I played every single one in the NHL. The hardest one's center. To be like a second line, first line center is the hardest thing to do, because you have to do it well in your own end, and you have to drive offense. And you're in the middle of the hurricane, and you skate the whole time, physically and like conditionally. Everything it's so hard. Let's just throw them in the middle. See what I mean? Come on, it's gonna take some time. I think you bring him up and let him go nuts. VC can play. I mean, these guys will adequate, give you 10, 12 minutes at center. Can Cooley play in
Yeah,
the middle?
I don't think so. I think, I mean, Brodzinski is, I mean, especially if we're going off of, the way that they handled things last year, Brodzinski is going to go right in, and then they'll call somebody up, especially for the road trip, because they always like to have an extra guy around. I was saying, just throwing names out there, if they wanted to stick with veterans who they know they could do Bleed or Belzeal, Berard has been doing okay if they wanted to go really young. But if they wanted a center, they could go Lecision or Bo Gruel. He's an option as well. I think he's been playing top line center for them down there. But again, like it's thin. It's really, really thin, and it's an organizational need for sure. And I think it has been. I think that they've been trying to identify drafting more centers, but it kind of just rears its ugly head in this sort of situation.
I just got out of the gym. I'll call Drew.
I was gonna say, Brian, you still lace him up?
Skated Wednesday night. Actually played D. I was playing D though.
Yeah. Is it like muscle memory for you, Brian, or like because I remember talking to my dad. My dad played my dad played basketball when he was in college, and he tried to play in like adult rec leagues after the fact, and he always used to talk about how his brain would be like, do this, do this, do this, and then his body would be like, what are you trying to do? Like, is it kind of similar?
There's a little like, hold on a second there, buddy. We got to take a few more, a couple more crossovers before you want to hit the stride going. Yeah, I mean, like the second half, I'm at the point now where like the second half of the game, I'm good to go. There's not a whole lot of warming up.
Second half.
There's like a 7-minute time to get dressed by the time I finally get to the rink, if I can even get there. And then you just shoot a couple pucks and they drop the puck. But yeah, it's still fun. I kind of still once a month I'll lose my mind, yell at somebody. It's frustrating.
I'm sure. Well, somebody who is breaking a little bit out of his frustration is Mika Zibanejad. He had a goal on Thursday night, ended a pretty long goalless streak. I think it was 8 games. And he opened up at practice the other day about something he's opened up many times over the course of his career. And it's these streaky stretches that he goes through. But obviously this most recent one was pretty tough, and it kind of culminated into this moment on the ice a couple of games ago. Keandre Miller noticed he looked off, and he, came off the ice, and the way Laviolette talked about it after the game, it sounded like Mika really needed a moment to compose himself, because he really was overexerting himself trying to do a lot to break out of this little streak that he's been going through. I mean, Larry, you were there at practice. I mean, what could you say about his demeanor and the way that he handled that situation?
Well, he's, I've known him for a long time now, and he's a very sensitive individual. He's an elite athlete at the top of his craft, and yet he has become so insecure when adversity strikes that I've always been shocked, and this is really from the start of my career, at how quickly players can lose confidence. Guys with resumes, decorated resumes, they go through a couple of weeks of, a tough stretch of a couple of weeks, and they talk about how their confidence is ebbing. Zibanejad is that, to the 100th percentile. We had a long talk in training camp about how he strives to keep negativity away from him at every turn. And he talked about how even negative questions after games can put him off, and can put him in a negative space. And so this is just a buildup of weeks of frustration. He hasn't looked like himself at all. Like the last couple of games, he's played better, but he hadn't looked like himself at all. He looked like he did during the COVID season when he was coming back from COVID, and he was just not ineffective, but he was falling. He wasn't in the right places. He would fan on shots. And that's what it's looked like. So it all obviously built up in that moment on the ice. And then the next morning he talked about it. And last night he played, I think, a little bit freer than he had.
One of his better games that he's had for sure.
But they need him. They
So
need
badly.
him to they need him to be a top player. Because he's not playing well. Kreider isn't playing particularly well at 5-on-5. His last game or two has been a little bit better, but I don't think he's scored a goal on 5-on-5 this year, has he, Chris?
I don't think so.
Does he have one? Does he have 1 point?
Oh, 5-on-5, I think he has.
But
I think Mika only has like a couple 5-on-5 points. So
they need Zibanejad.
Yeah.
It's a funny thing. It'll grip you, but you can't focus on things like that. You have to simplify. If it's going hard, just do the things you have to do. I look at, and I know it's a tough example because of how great Patrice Bergeron was, but it wasn't like light it up every night. It wasn't drive the offense every night. He did drive offense, but he focused on, okay, this face off here. This is my job here. This is my D zone responsibility here. This is, he was just the best. And then if I ever got bad, like if it was bad, actually Brandon Dubinsky told me this. He goes, just go on YouTube and watch all the goals you ever scored.
Ooh.
I'm telling you, this thing works 100% of the time. It worked with me after he told me that. It works for him. He was. Oh, it's so funny. He was telling me that. It just not necessarily goals next game. Actually, even though that did happen a couple times for me, but you just start playing better. You just like, I can do this. I'm watching myself do this on the computer right now. I know I can do this, and then you
remind yourself. Remind yourself. And
it's what you focus on.
I know. And I think I've told this story on the podcast before, but I remember having a conversation with Mika once, just saying to him, like, do you ever feel like you just need to remind yourself, like, I'm Mika Zibanejad. I'm the number one, center on the Rangers. I'm a top 10 center in this league, whatever it may be. Don't you think that you could use a little bit of that in your game, like to impose yourself a little bit? And, he took it and kind of was like, yeah, but like, that's not me. That's not Mika's personality. That's not who he is as a person. Like he's such a cerebral player and a cerebral person that the mental side of the game, as he said in that interview, is probably one of the toughest parts of the game for him, which, everybody has their thing.
I'll tell you what, he was that player in 2019-20. And he
scored every game.
He took over almost every game. He played with conceit. He knew he was going to score. And to Brian's point about Patrice Bergeron, I think the last couple of years where Mika's 5-on-5 production hasn't been quite what it had been, he was still so good on every other aspect of the game that you could recognize his value. Everyone could recognize his value, even if he wasn't scoring at 5-on-5, because he was doing so much. Their goals for percentage was so high. He and Kreider for a number of years, but everything has broken down this year. When it's not just they're not scoring, it's that, wait a second, Zibanejad's been on the ice for 5 goals for and 12 against. What is this? This has never happened, through his tenure in New York. So I think it just built up. He's a very good player. He took a lot of heat in the playoffs, which I think was undeserved. And I said, I think they just asked him to do too much. He's not as especially physical player, and he was matched up against the most physical guys night after night after night against Carolina and Florida, and he did what he could. So, and that's why I've always said they need a big third center, physical third center. So, but I think maybe it'll be good for Mika to get away for a week and be on the road, just where it's just hockey for a week, and he's not hearing anything at the Garden. That could be good for him.
Yeah, just as you were talking, I was thinking about how I don't think I've seen him have that wide open shot on the power play in the circle for his slap shot that he always used to convert on. I don't think he's seen that shot clearly in like a really long time. And I think the power play, he when he gets going on the power play, I feel like he's one of those guys that also uses the power play to get some momentum on his side. And I just haven't seen him even have a clear look at that because of the way it's so predictable now at this point. And I feel like every time I say the word predictable to any of the guys on that top power play unit, they don't like it a lot. They don't like it at all. But I just feel like it has gotten pretty predictable at this point, especially for how long that those players have been together. And I think that could also be hindering Mika a little bit there. I don't know if you agree or not.
Well, they're not going to let him. They're not going to let him shoot.
Yeah, no, obviously, but it used to be open. Like it, it's come to a point where they're expecting it to go there. The goalies are shifting earlier. Everybody is preparing for that slap shot because it's been there for so long. They are expecting it at this point.
If the other guys create chances in other areas, it'll be open.
It should. Yes.
I'll give you 8 reasons why. Alex Ovechkin still gets open and hits it.
Yes.
So that's the only, and he's right there. And every time we see it, somebody should cover that guy because he's done that a whole bunch.
Isn't that,
you need the guy in the middle. You need Troach in the middle. You need different grade A's and get burned on it. Kreide's tipping him in or whatever. And then that'll open up again.
Yeah. Well, isn't that what you always said when Stamkos was wide open in that circle? It's like, well, how is he wide open?
Where did he come from? Why is he there? Been there for 15 years.
All righty. Well, this was good discussion, guys. We've got a 4-game road trip out west coming up. I will be there. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.